and opinions expressed on My Story Living with Lupus podcast represents each person's individual experience. By listening to this podcast or reading our blog, you agree not to use this podcast or blog as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others. As always, consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. My Story Living with Lupus podcast is officially trademarked, all rights reserved. Welcome back to another episode of My Story Living with Lupus. I'm your host, Susan Hendricks, and I'm so glad that you could join me on today, Friday, August the 2nd, 2019. In today's episode, we'll be discussing lupus low disease activity state linked to reduced healthcare costs, and Progentek granted $1.7 million to validate measures of SLE disease activity. So you know what I want you to do? Come on, just like usual, grab that cup of coffee. Grab your cup of tea, and if you're listening late at night, you know I appreciate it. So grab your favorite glass of wine and come on and join me right here on My Story Living with Lupus. Are you ready to discuss lupus low disease activity state linked to reduced healthcare costs? Now, attaining a low disease state deemed lupus low disease activity state, or LLDAS, has become a major goal for treatment for people with systemic lupus erythematosus. Researchers now have demonstrated that achieving this state not only protects patients from organ damage and improves quality of life, it also leads to major reductions in healthcare use and costs that makes it a cost-effective endpoint. The study, Lupus Low Disease Activity State, is associated with reduced direct healthcare costs in patients with systemic lupus erythematosus, was published in the journal Arthritis Care and Research. Treat to Target, T to T, an approach in which therapies are administered to meet specific disease conditions, has been used for designing the best treatment options in a number of diseases. Now, in systemic lupus erythematosus, better known as SLE, a major goal of treatment is to attain an LLDAS state, which is defined by a set of 5 conditions. The first, SLE Disease Activity Index, better known as SLEDAI-2K, score a measure of disease activity in SLE of 4 or lower, and lack of disease in major organ systems, no hemolytic anemia, and no Gastrointestinal activity. No new signs of disease activity since last assessment. A physician global assessment known as PGA, score of 1 or lower. A daily dose of prednisone or a similar steroid equal to or below 7.5 milligrams. Well-tolerated standard doses of immunosuppressive or approved biologic medicines. The use of LLDAS has resulted in significant improvements in patient outcomes, including their quality of life, researchers state. However, whether LLDAS also is associated with reduced healthcare utilization and costs requires further investigation. To learn more, the researchers evaluated clinical data from 200 people with SLE who visited Monash Health, a public hospital in Melbourne, Australia, at least twice between October 2013 and June 2016. Patients, mostly women, 88%, with a median age of 42 years, were followed for a median of 2.1 years. Researchers also evaluated healthcare utilization, including hospital admissions, emergencies, specialist visits, and investigations and prescription history. Overall, 51% of patients spent at least half of the observation period in LLDAS. Among the patients reviewed, 47.5% had activity disease during the follow-up period, and more than half, 64.5%, experienced at least one mild to moderate flare. A total 16% experienced an increase in organ damage during the observation period. Regarding healthcare use, patients attended a median of 6 specialist visits per year, 5 of which were visits to a lupus specialist. Medical investigations occurred 5.2 times a year. In addition, nearly 1/3 of patients, that's 31.5%, had at least one emergency department visit during the observation period. Among the 28.5% of individuals admitted for longer than 1 day, the median length of stay was 4 days. Each lupus patient had a mean annual cost of $7,413 a year. A higher disease activity score and increased musculoskeletal or renal disease activity all were associated with increased medical costs as well as disease flares or organ damage at the start of the study. A daily prednisone dose above 7.5 milligrams a day and use of immunosuppressants or biological agents also were associated with increased annual medical costs. On the contrary, spending more than at least half of a person's time in LLDAS was associated with a significant reduction by 25.9%, or $1,604 of the annual direct medical cost. They demonstrated that LLDAS, specifically spending less than 50% of the observation period in LLDAS, was associated with reduced direct healthcare costs, while baseline damage and glucocorticoids use were associated with increased costs, the researchers stated. These findings demonstrate that targeting a low disease activity state provides better benefits to patient care as well as outcomes and better healthcare utilizations. The results should be used as a support for the utility of LLDAS as a T2T endpoint in SLE, the study concluded. All aboard First-Time Cruisers, presented by Parisian Park Dreams and Themes. Cruise with a twist, right side of 50, hosting a session, stepping into my newness. Door prizes, raffles, and fun in the sun. April the 2nd through April 6th, 2020. Jacksonville Cruise Port, Jacksonville, Florida. Deposit $150 due July 10th, 2019. Ports of call: Freeport and Nassau. $579 Ocean View per person, $554 interior per person. Contact 770-982-9399 and ask for D. Parks. Entrepreneur and creator of Right Side of 50, and I am my sister's keeper. Sheila Smith, motivational and empowerment speaker, is available for your next empowerment event and conference. You can book her for your next event at rightside50@gmail.com. That's RIGHTSIDEOF50@gmail.com, or call 470-330-1426. Each one encourage one. We're talking now about Progentech, granted $1.7 million to validate measure of SLE disease activity. Progentech, a company developing new diagnostic technologies for chronic conditions, has been awarded $1.7 million to validate its blood biomarker test as an accurate tool